Well, good evening, everyone, and I'd like to thank you for all coming out, and we appreciate you taking some time over this weekend to come and just learn more about our fellow safety officers and just learn a little bit more about Faith in Blue. In a few words, I'm sure the Chief will share with you. My name is Michael Shepard, and we welcome you tonight to Faith in Blue. Faith in Blue was inaugurated actually in 2020. You can go on their website and see by Movement Forward Incorporated. And in a few words, and I'm sure the Chief will share a little bit as well, but the basic premise is for our peace officers to build bridges into our community. The basic foundational belief is the better you know your community, the better you can serve your community. So through faith-based connections, we seek to come together and just learn more about the work our fellow police officers do, as well as get to learn the community that they serve and build inclusivity, diversity, and everything. Okay, so just like to welcome you again tonight, and thank you for coming. And I'm just going to say a brief prayer, and then I'm going to hand it over to Chief Deaver. Amen. Father God, we just come before you right now. We thank you, dear God, for allowing us to just come and gather together on this night and this evening, oh Lord. We know, Lord, that you do seek to protect us, and we thank you, dear God, for our safety officers and how they put their lives on the line in serving. And we just thank you, dear God, for this initiative, oh God, that was begun 2 years ago, Lord, to better understand, better know the fellow community. And Lord, we believe you're behind it, oh God, because you are in the front of it, oh God, faith, oh Lord. And we thank you, dear God, but by faith that you've taught us to live. And we just pray tonight, dear God, that this would be a start of something that, a movement that can continue, dear God, annually and periodically, dear Father, and reaching out to the community, dear Lord, to get to know one another better and better, dear Lord, so that both can be served, oh Lord. We thank you for again, the officers taking the time out and wanting to, again, extend a hand of getting to know, dear Lord. And we just pray over this time and the presentation as well, Lord, that it would be for your glory and honor. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right. Thank you, Mike. And thank you all for being here. Friday night is a tough act, but I appreciate you all coming out. I got to get this out of the way. Boomer. All right. Hopefully we will show up tomorrow. I don't know. But I appreciate Mike working with me on this. So I met Mike at, was it CPA or Leadership Lewisville? CPA. He went through our CPA class probably 2 years ago, I think just prior to COVID. And in that CPA, I'd mentioned that I wanted to start doing town hall style events. And then COVID hit, and that kind of put a damper on everything. But he is a persistent man, I'm here to tell you. He kept emailing me and bringing it up, and, you know, we had the COVID came back, so we had to postpone that. Then we were going to have it Monday for National Night Out, and then this came up, and this was something that wasn't on my radar, the Faith in Blue weekend. And you'll see on the next slide exactly what that is. But this is our first year participating in it. It kind of started in the northern area, so a lot of Texas agencies really didn't participate in it. But TPCA, that's the Texas Police Chiefs Association, they made a big push this year and asked us to try to do it. Of course, that push was about 2 weeks ago, so my team was able to throw all this together, and we had 3 events scheduled for this. We started off the day this morning at the CCA, working in the food pantry, stocking shelves and things like that. I never realized how many people go through that food pantry, but we were there for about 2 hours, and there were hundreds of people that went through that, so I thank them for what they do for that. And then we got the event tonight, and then Monday we will be with the Salvation Army doing their food line. I've got some information I want to go through. That we got a long agenda, but I promise it's not going to take that long. I'll be through in about 30 minutes or so. On the next slide, you'll see our core values and our mission statement. And our mission statement is through a partnership with the community. The mission of the Lewisville Police Department is to solve problems and increase public safety in a manner that is fair, impartial, and transparent. And that means a lot because those are the pillars of procedural justice. Fairness, voice, transparency, and impartiality. And that affects both internal operations and external operations. So dealing with the public, and then how me as a chief deal with my employees. They have to feel like they are treated fair, have a voice, and we're transparent in what we do. So that's something that we strive for each and every day. So you'll see the agenda I'm going to go through. The Mayor's Commission, I'll talk a little bit about that. The 8 Can't Wait, response to resistance, police transparency, crime stats, active threat training, community outreach, and how to interact with the police. And that will be a video at the end. I urge y'all to stay and watch that. It's probably about a 10-minute video, but it's put out by the state of Texas because people really don't know how to interact with the police. And we see that on a daily basis, and some guidance that parents are given really isn't the correct guidance to give, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So Listen, Learn, Lead, that was a commission that was formed by Mayor Durham after the murder of George Floyd. He really wanted to hear from the African American community and see how the city could work with the community to build bridges and move forward from that event. There were 4 recommendations that were specific to the police department, and I will go through all of them. So the first one was to provide wider public awareness of and access to the Police Encounters educational video. That's the video I was just referring to, required for incoming 9th graders under the Sandra Bland Act. So that was passed in the 1920 legislative session. But that was passed in the 1920 legislative session, and the schools were charged with educating students before they graduated high school. So there was a 4-year implementation. When we had the Listen, Learn, Lead Commission, at that point the high school hadn't done anything as far as educating the students. So we worked through our resource officers, the school resource officers, worked with the school district to get that underway and started, and we've done that. We've also posted it to our website and pushed it out on social media because it's the message is good and clear, so it's a good thing. The next thing that was specific to police was develop and implement a method for using actual body camera videos of officer interactions as part of follow-up training program for identifying hidden biases. So in December of 21, we began utilizing video to determine whether or not de-escalation was being used in our response to resistance encounters. That was something that we did not track prior to then, but we have started doing so now. We also find videos that we could learn from, and we pull those videos out, and those videos are often used in training sessions and occasionally in the briefing room setting. We also have a software through our body-worn camera provider that allows us to send alerts to supervisors if there are keywords that are mentioned on video. All of our videos are transcribed, so if there is something that would cause us alarm that comes up that is said, we won't know who said it, but it will send that supervisor an alert that someone needs to review that video. And then the other thing that software does is it will randomly select officers for video review. So that ensures that we're transparent and that we are trying to do a good job in reviewing what our officers do on a day in and day out basis. The next thing is implement ongoing training sessions during regularly scheduled officer briefings as refresher training on racial equity and hidden biases. So we didn't have a formal briefing training, but I did get in the budget approved to purchase software that will, they really focus on 10-minute videos, 15-minute videos, 20-minute videos, things that we can use in briefing that the officers will watch before they go out on the streets. So we've implemented that program. And one of the first things we rolled out was cultural awareness in policing. So all of our officers have been through that, and that was started just this past year. The other thing, as part of our annual budget process, we will look for emerging trends and explore options for alternative responses using civilians. So we've kind of started that already, and that was in the works prior to this. So in May of 21, I did a winter retreat with City Council, and me and the fire chief, we had a program that we wanted to implement, and it was called co-care, and that is community caretaking, and it's really geared towards mental health issues. Too many interactions with police result in death whenever there's mental health involved. So we wanted to try to reduce that. So we have officers that are certified mental health officers, and we also have a MHMR clinician that is assigned to that unit. And their goal is to not only respond to the calls for service that we have when someone is in crisis, but then also to do follow-ups with them, because the goal is to keep them out of crisis. And if they're on their medication, they're constantly seeing their doctors, then they're less likely to go into crisis, and that's when we have those deadly encounters that we do have. So all of those are the ones specific for the police department. If you go on the City of Lewisville webpage, that's a photo of the webpage, and you'll see that there is a Listen, Learn, Lead report card. There are numerous recommendations for the city as a whole, and all of those, including the ones for the police department, are updated quarterly. Next thing I want to talk about is the 8 Can't Wait. That was a big national movement after the George Floyd incident, and they wanted all police departments to implement these 8 policies, and these are their stats. They say it will decrease police violence by 72%. So I wanted to go through those since it was such a big deal back then. So the first one was to ban chokeholds and strangleholds. Our general orders already had banned chokeholds, so we just simply added the verbiage about strangleholds. Now, they call for an outright ban on it. I can't very well do that, because if there is a deadly force incident, then the officers are going to use whatever means they need to use to go home that night. So if they've got someone that is fighting them, they're almost unconscious, then they can choke someone to make sure that they go home that night. So that's what we've got to be a little bit cautious of with all of these things, is anytime deadly force is used, an officer could grab a lamp sitting on a table and hit someone over the head with it. You know, that's not traditionally how we do things, but in a deadly force incident, you do what you have to do to go home. The next thing was to require de-escalation. We did implement that, and that was implemented actually in 2017, we had already implemented it. We taught that first year. In 2018, it was mandated by TCO, which is the licensing agency for all Texas police officers. So we actually implemented that before it was even mandated. And then after George Floyd, that was a big push nationwide, but we were already doing that. The next thing is to require a warning before shooting or before using deadly force. That's not always feasible. In our hiring boards, we have an example where someone is, you get dispatched to shots fired, and you pull up at a schoolyard, and there's someone with a rifle sticking through a fence actively shooting kids. Well, you're not going to pull up and say, "Police department, drop your weapon." You're going to take that threat out. And if he doesn't know you're there, then that's even better. So it's not always practical or feasible for us to do that announcement. But we did add those words to the general order when practical or feasible. And then the next thing was exhaust all other means before shooting. And that's really what we do anyway. We did add the verbiage that it's at the bottom underlined, deadly force will be used with great restraint and as a last resort only when the level of resistance warrants the use of deadly force. The next thing was duty to intervene. And what that is simply if me and one of these officers are on a scene and I'm using too much force, then that officer has a responsibility to stop me from using that force. That was not in our general orders. It was part of our practice, but it was not specifically addressed in the general orders. So we did add that. So that was one thing that we did. And then we added the language at the bottom that's bolded that says any failure to intervene and or failure to report improper use of force shall be grounds for discipline up to and including termination. The next thing was to ban shooting at moving vehicles. We always see a lot of examples of where things go sideways when officers start shooting at vehicles. Generally, it's not a good idea. If you shoot at a vehicle, that vehicle is not going to stop. It's going to keep going somewhere. And years ago, probably 6-8 years ago, we started teaching about officer-created jeopardy. And that was some of the similar incidents that I'm talking about. So an officer would jump in front of a vehicle and point his gun at it and tell them to stop. Well, that's an officer-created jeopardy because they didn't have to jump in front of the vehicle. So it's bad practice. It's not good officer safety. So we started teaching that, and I think a lot of agencies nationally do that as well. But we can't. That's another one that we can't just carte blanche say you cannot do. You don't have to look very far back to the parade incident where the guy was driving through the parade taking people out. So we had already added to our general orders even before that incident that deadly force could be authorized if a vehicle was actually being used to commit that deadly force. So I think that's a pretty sound policy. And then require use of force continuum. I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. Most departments had that in the early 80s, 90s, and really it was the early 2000s that departments went away from it. When I got into law enforcement about 30 years ago, we had a use of force continuum. And you know, it really doesn't work that well. And a lot of research realized that officers would actually use greater force than necessary trying to abide by that continuum. But on the next slide, you'll kind of see what a use of force continuum looks like. What it tries to do is balance the resisting force with the officer force. So if a resisting person does this, then the officer can do this, but one level higher. And then if the person does this, the officer does this, but one level higher. So it gets somewhat confusing. And then as you know, incidents are always very fluid. You know, you may start off at this level and then come down to this level, and it's just really, really hard to abide by a continuum like this. So that was really why departments got away from it. And then this next page, you'll see an article that was published, and I'm not going to be able to read what's in red, but go ahead and click the next one. That was one of the reasons they said, and I think I said it already, that officers, they discovered that officers were actually using more force doing the continuum than they were without it. And then you see some of the other reasons that departments had gotten away from it. But it was one of those things. It was, you know, it was something old, and the movement was trying to bring that back, and it's really, really not a good thing to bring back. Typically, things like that are ingrained in law enforcement, the way we do things, they're hard to get away from. So that was a positive thing to get away from, and there were still agencies that continued to have them well into the 2000s, but most had gotten away from it. And then she'll click through the rest of the things there, but I won't beat that up anymore. The next thing is comprehensive reporting for use of force. We already did that, and we require use of force reports anytime a firearm is discharged, anytime we take action that results in or is alleged to have resulted in any injury, and anytime applies force using non-lethal weapon or if a chokehold, stranglehold, or carotid artery neck restraint is used. Anytime we do a use of force report, those reports are immediately reviewed by supervisors to make sure that that the appropriate force was used, and then a committee reviews those again, and they review all video and everything associated with that incident, and then lastly it comes to the chief's office for us to review. And so it's reviewed 3 different times before we say, okay, that incident was okay. Next thing I want to talk about is response to resistance. I'll start off with the photo that's up there. So that's a Taser 7. That's what our officers are carrying. It's the yellow and black Taser. That is something that we transitioned to after the incident in Minneapolis where the officer had a weapon confusion issue and deployed her firearm whenever she meant to deploy her Taser. This is just a little thing that will help with that, but whenever the officer sees yellow, they should know that that's a Taser. And then we also went to a weak side, weak carry draw. So before that, we carried our Tasers on this side. You would draw it with your gun hand and then bring it over to this side. That's the way they did it in Minneapolis. After that incident, we started drawing the Taser with our weak hand so that we don't have any type of confusion. So I hope that if it reduces one incident, because that one incident changed that officer's life. So if we can do something and prevent just one of those from occurring here, I think it's a good idea. So use of force, this is where y'all get engaged. Are y'all ready? All right, so click it one time. So we had 51,494 calls for service in 2021. So how many of those calls do you think resulted in use of force? Percentage. What percentage of those calls do you think resulted in use of force? Shout out your answer when you know. 10? Okay. Anybody else? 2%? Okay. 5%? From over here. No guess? 2%. All right, click it one time. Force was used in 0.097%. So it's pretty remarkable. I think people think that we use force more than we do because that's what they see in the media. And it's quite often ugly use of force and bad use of force that they see, but it is very rarely used. And the next slide will show the pie chart of how often we use force. So we used force 50 times in 2021. And then you see a breakdown of what force was used. And I know it's kind of small to see, but 12 physical holds, 1 knee strike. Most were Taser deployments, and that was 31. Now, that doesn't mean that 50 people had force used against them, because sometimes, officers will start using physical holds to try to get someone in custody. They keep on resisting, so then it escalates, and they'll use a body strike or a Taser, and each one of those counts as a use of force incident. Anybody surprised by that? All right, so the next slide is use of force by race. So we track everything anytime we use force. So you can see there the amount of use of force that's used. And we do use force against black African Americans more than we do any other race. And there's something that's troubling with that that concerns me a little bit. And really it's, we're seeing some defiance since 2020, since George Floyd. And it kind of goes into the video that I will share at the end. People are often putting themselves in bad situations. And, if an officer tells you to step out of the vehicle, you've got to step out of the vehicle. And we're seeing more and more people that are refusing to do that. And they really don't have a choice. Everything we do is recorded on both fleet cameras coming from the vehicle, body-worn cameras from the officer. I urge each and every one of you, and your kids especially, if an officer tells them to do something, do it, and then complain later if you don't think it was the right thing. because we will review it, and I'll get into investigations in just a second. But go home. You know, the last thing we want to use is force against someone. So another quiz. How many times do you think deadly force has been used by our officers since 2000? Shout it out. 0.5? We're going back to the other slide. Anybody else? 5 times? 5%? 5%? Okay. So the number of times we have used deadly force since 2000 is 5. 5 times. 3 of them survived that use of force. Only 2 were deceased by the use of force from the police officers, and that's on the next slide. One was in 2012. It was a guy that pointed a gun at someone at the McDonald's drive-thru. We had an officer in that immediate area. The officer arrived, tried to stop him. That guy, he was from Oklahoma, American Indian. He got out of the vehicle, pointed a gun at the officers, and the officer shot him. Unfortunately, he did die from his injuries. The next thing was in 2014, a white male carjacked someone in Highland Village, got into a road rage incident in Lewisville. We were called, we started responding. Officers located that person, got in a short pursuit with him. He got out of the vehicle right up the street on Round Grove at the QT, had a shotgun, fired a round at the officers that were pulling into the parking lot, and the officer returned fire and shot and killed him. Prior to that, the last time we actually shot and killed someone was 1984. So, you know, our officers, they use great restraint when it comes to deadly force. I often say, you know, we use force because we have to, not because we're authorized to. There are many incidents, I know in my career and certainly some of these other officers' career, where we would have been justified in using deadly force, but we didn't. And I think that's a key point for the way we do things here. And all those incidents are investigated by Texas Rangers, and all of those are referred to the district attorney's office. What confuses a lot of people, and people, you know, in today's climate, people want an immediate response. They want to know what's going on, why isn't someone in custody? And one thing that hurts a little bit, so I'll educate you, if we are totally justified in shooting someone, but that person dies at the officer's hands, the coroner's result is going to show that as a homicide. And people see that, and they, you know, there's that negative connotation associated with homicide, and they think someone should be in jail. Well, there's justified homicide also. So if someone tries to break into your house, you shoot and kill that person, and you were justified, that's a justifiable homicide, but it's still a homicide. All right, let's talk about transparency in policing. So the next slide, you'll see what all is available on our website. We've got a whole list of things that are available. We publish our general orders and our policies. We publish a termination report so the public can see what employees we have terminated. And, you know, when you look at that list of the ones that are terminated, probably over half of them, the reason that they were terminated was because someone else in the police department reported them. So I think that's a good thing. And then also, you know, we're not some of those agencies that can't get rid of people because of collective bargaining and things like that. If someone screws up, the officer still has their due process. They get their appeal and everything else, but I don't have a civil service commission that overturns my decision and puts the officers back on the street where they don't need to be. And that's what you saw in Minneapolis, and you see in Dallas and some of the other agencies. Officers going back on the street that really shouldn't be there. So we're trying to be a lot more transparent in what we do. There were a lot of things, our general orders, you know, why we kept those a secret. We used to tell people you've got to do an open records request to get those, and we talked about it, and we're like, why? There's no tactical information in there. There's no SWAT procedure that we would be leaking that would endanger officers. Let's push it out. So we looked at all these, and that's how we decided what gets pushed out and what doesn't. So next we'll talk about the complaint process. I will tell you that all complaints are investigated, whether they come from internal or external sources. Complaints against officers, there has to be a signed complaint, and that is state law. For me to take discipline against an officer, there has to be a signed complaint. So when the public comes in and complains, a lot of times they don't want to sign the complaint, but they have to for me to be able to do something. And then any employee receiving complaint will refer the complaining person to a supervisor. So if someone sees Officer Brown and they want to file a complaint, he's mandated to refer that person to a supervisor so a complaint can be taken. So these are the types of complaints. A Class 1 complaint, those are the more serious violations, civil rights violations, excessive use of force, death of a person in custody, discharging firearms, things like that. Those are all investigated by Internal Affairs. We have an Internal Affairs investigator, and he reports directly to me. So all of those Class 1 complaints are done by him or another person that I could appoint to that position. The next type of complaint is a Class 2 complaint. Those are the ones we see more often. You know, your officer was on Main Street and changed lanes and didn't signal. And I was stopped for not signaling. Why does he not have to signal? You know, those things are handled at the supervisor level because typically those types of things result in a counseling entry, maybe an oral reprimand or something like that, depending on their prior history. The Class 1 complaints, those could result in written reprimands, suspensions, or terminations. So we have dispositions associated with each and every complaint that we do. It's not finalized until we have a disposition. Unfounded is one disposition, and that's where the allegation is false or not factual. Exonerated, the incident did occur but was legal and proper. And in a not sustained, there's insufficient evidence to either prove or disprove the allegation. And then the last one is sustained. The allegation is supported by sufficient evidence. And I will tell you, it's amazing how many people will file a complaint against an officer, and we look at the video, and it never happened. What they alleged never happened. And we invite those people in to watch the video. What do you think they say when we tell them, hey, why don't you come in and watch the video with us? Oh, never mind. So it's just amazing. I don't think, you know, video when it first came out, officers were really reluctant to be a part of it. And I think it's the best thing to happen to law enforcement because it really protects the officers that are doing the right thing. So crime stats, let's talk about that. So these are the 2021 crime stats. You'll see overall in 2021 our crime rate dropped by 0.97%. Part 2 crimes dropped by 2.36%, and Part 1 crimes actually increased a little bit, 2.69%. So Part 1 crimes are the more serious crimes, aggravated assault, robberies, things like that. Part 2 crimes are the typically property crimes, thefts, burglary of a vehicle, and similar type crimes. So overall, our crime rate did go down, and it's the third year in a row that crime went down. I'm a little worried about this year because we started off with several homicides at the beginning of the year. Last year, most agencies in the DFW area, they saw increases in crime, particularly homicides. Our homicides were not up as high as they could have been if we'd have followed the other agencies' path, I guess. What is concerning to me is on the next slide, and that is the offenses involving a firearm. So there's 4 years worth of data there. So you've got aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated assault, family violence with a firearm, aggravated robbery, deadly conduct, UCW, unlawful possession by a felon, and then murder and manslaughter. And you see the numbers over the years. I kind of did a heat, not a map, a heat something, I don't know. But you can see that really over the last couple of years, those offenses have really gone up where firearms are involved. And I know that's the same thing that other agencies in DFW are seeing. I want to note a couple of categories, and that's unlawful carrying a weapon and unlawful possession by a weapon. You see those numbers are through the roof, and that's because our officers are focused on getting weapons out of the hands of criminals. So that is their task to try to do on a daily basis, is to get the firearms that are in the hands of criminals, get that firearm off the street, and get the criminal off the street. And we are seeing numerous, so anytime we take a firearm off the street, we test fire that firearm and submit the data to a national database. And it is amazing to see that firearms we are recovering here in Lewisville, just on a traffic stop, they were used in a homicide in Dallas, a robbery where shots were fired in Fort Worth, and all across the Metroplex, the state, and even the nation. So those test fires are something that's relatively new. I think we've been doing it about 3 or 4 years now, but that's really how we're able to better connect suspects with crimes in other jurisdictions. We had one of the homicides I spoke of earlier this year, a weapon, or the cartridge was recovered, and we were able to connect that suspect to another incident in Dallas and was able to make that arrest. So once again, here are the arrests that we've made by race. 37% were white that we arrested. Black was about 30%, Asian 2%, Hispanic 26%. And that's every arrest that was made during the year of 2021. So I want to talk a little bit about active threat training. So especially after Uvalde. So we have been doing active threat training for, I can't even tell you how long, many, many years. But something we started doing about 5 or 6 years ago was the active threat training. We brought the fire department in. And the fire department, we love our fire department. They're great people, and they were instrumental in partnering with us with this. So if you'll remember Columbine, back when that happened, officers secured the scene, perimeter, called SWAT, waited on SWAT to get there, and then SWAT made entry and found out that the guy had committed suicide. So we knew we needed to change that response because people were shot and they were dying inside of that school. So we are taught to go in, and I'll get into that. And that's not what happened in Uvalde, and it certainly should have been. But what we do is we now have rescue task forces. So when our officers get on the scene, I think we can go to the next slide probably. Yeah, I'll get into it in a couple of slides. So our active threat training, it's a phased approach. The first approach is to stop the killing. The next approach is to stop the dying. So stop the killing, what we do, officers move in alone. If they're the first officer on the scene, they go in. They don't wait for another unit. They don't wait for a shield. They don't wait for anything else. They go in. They try to get to the shooter as quickly as possible. Officer safety is secondary. Preserving life of the innocent, that's the priority. And that officers will enter until the threat is either eliminated, captured, or believed to have escaped. Once the person is captured or taken out at that point, then we activate what's called a rescue task force, and that's where we stop the dying. So what we do is we have officers in different groups. We have officers and paramedics working together going into those buildings in what we call warm areas. So they're areas that we know there's no more bad guys, or we don't think there's any more bad guys. So we will escort the paramedics into the school at that point, get those people treated and evacuated as quickly as possible. And then those rescue task forces expand through the school until all the injured people are removed from the school. And then anyone that's uninjured, they will remain in school until we can get everything calmed down and have a reunification center. So that's our approach to school shootings and really workplace violence and anything like that. What you saw in Uvalde would not happen here. So the next thing is community outreach. And we do a lot of things to reach out to the community. This is one example of that. The next slide shows many other examples. I urge you all to get involved. There's certainly a commitment to do that by the fact that you're here tonight. But there's many ways. The Civilian Police Academy, did you have a good time, Mike, when you went through that? It's fun. It's very hands-on. There's many different things like that you can do. Get involved with your National Night Out. We have an Explorer program where we invite kids that may want to pursue a career in law enforcement. They come hang out with us. Citizens University, Coffee with Cops, all kinds of things. And a lot of that is done by our resource unit. And some of those guys are sitting over here, so I certainly thank them for what they do day in and day out. The next slide is just some pictures of different things that we've done. Very fun to get out and engage with the community. Talked about the Citizens Police Academy. We typically host that one time a year. It's going on right now. They're about halfway through. About November-ish, we'll have a graduation, and it's always fun to hear their experiences. There's always some very funny things that happen. So the last thing is the video. Like I said, I think it's about 10 minutes long, but I think it's important, and it is on our website if you've got kids that you want to make sure that they get to see it.
Hello, I'm State Senator Royce West. Today I'd like to discuss with you the Community Safety Education Act, legislation designed to define the behavioral expectation of law enforcement and citizens during traffic interactions. More specifically, there's been issues that have arose over the last few years concerning the interaction between law enforcement and citizens, and in many instances there have been fatalities as a result of this interaction. And so we believed in Texas that to come up with behavioral expectations for those types of interactions would be most appropriate. Towards that particular end, we've assembled a group of stakeholders, law enforcement, civil rights organizations, to come up with what we believe should be a set of behavioral expectations during those interactions. And so those behavioral expectations have been set forth in our driver's license manual. So when a person studies for their driver's license test, they will have to cover that content. And yes, you should expect at least one, maybe two questions on the driver's license test to cover that particular content. In addition, we decided to make certain that we embed it in the DNA of the state. The way we have gone about doing that, we've placed it in our school system and requiring, yes, mandating that students between the grades of 9 through 12 get that content, that is the behavior expectation, know what their rights are, and know if they want to compliment or either complain about a police officer, exactly how you go about doing that. In addition, we have placed that in our driver education courses as well as our police academies. The reason for doing this is to make certain that to the best extent possible, everyone is on the same page in terms of what are the behavioral expectations when stopped by a police officer. Heretofore, police officers understood what the behavior expectations were, but citizens haven't understood it. And so by making this simple change, we believe that we've incorporated into the DNA of our state, and by doing that we can make these types of interactions safer for all concerned. This is State Senator Royce West. Thank you.
Okay, please go faster because I am running late. I will not.
I'm going as fast as I can.
Please, just go through the light. Just don't let that light turn red.
Okay, fine. I think we're getting pulled over.
What? Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh no.
Obviously, if I go over the speed limit, we're gonna get pulled over.
Pastor, put your hands on the dash. Pastor,
Ma'am,
put your hands on the dashboard.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Driver, put your hands on the steering wheel. My name is Deputy Larry Hatch, Travis County Precinct 1. The reason why I stopped you is speeding 45 and 35. You have your driver's license and proof of insurance, ma'am? Thank you. Sit tight for a second. I'll be right back with you. You'll be asked to sign a citation.
This isn't saying that you agree. It's just saying that you're going to follow up with the court.
Now, you're going to be issued a citation for speeding 45 and 35. It's not a admission of guilt, but a promise to appear to court. You saw it right here at the last line, at the bottom line right there.
You will get a copy with all the information you need.
You'll be receiving notice in the mail. You got 30 days to appeal. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Penn. The video you just watched is intended to show you what not to do when you're stopped by a police officer. But what is the right thing to do? How should you as a citizen handle the situation? We've asked a cross-section of high school students and ordinary citizens to help us out by asking some of the typical questions that you might have about the right way to handle yourself if and when you get pulled over. Let's get right to it.
What does the officer expect to see when he approaches our car?
Officers don't always have a clear view into your vehicle. Keep your hands visible. Don't move around. Don't reach for anything. For example, you can place your hand on the steering wheel in the 10 and the 2 position. That makes sense? Take a deep breath. Breathe, relax, wait for the officer to approach, and he'll give you further instructions. If it's dark, turn the overhead light on.
Why does the officer tell us to roll down our windows? What's that all about?
On a traffic stop, the officer may ask you to roll down your windows for his or her own safety. Under certain circumstances, when there's not a great deal of illumination or when the windows have a tint, the officer may require you to roll down the windows to identify anybody who may be in the back seat.
What happens if I don't want to show you my driver's license or tell you who I am?
If you refuse to show your driver's license to an officer when he stops you on a traffic stop, the officer can arrest you for refusing to show your driver's license. And under certain circumstances, if probable cause exists, the officer may also require the passengers to identify themselves.
What happens if I don't have my driver's license with me? Will I be arrested? What if I just forgot it at home?
An officer can usually verify that you have a license once he obtains basic information from you. Depending on local law, you may be arrested, but most likely you will only get a citation.
Do I have to get out of my car? I'm not a criminal.
Most of the time, an officer will actually get out of the vehicle for safety. You will be amazed how many times an officer and/or his vehicle are struck by another driver while conducting a traffic stop. If the officer asks you to get out of the vehicle, it's for your safety and also for his. Put it this way, nobody wants to be standing 6 inches from the highway with their back to traffic.
What if I'm a passenger in a stopped car? Can I ask questions?
Many times passengers want to get involved with what's going on. Generally, we're only going to speak with the driver unless a passenger has done something wrong. The officer should only conduct business with the driver. It's up to the driver to pass on the information to the passenger.
Is forgetting to use my signal or going a few miles over the speed limit really a big deal?
Traffic law is all about everyone's safety. Most of the time, officers look for traffic violations in areas where there have been accidents, citizen complaints about traffic, or areas known to be dangerous like construction zones, narrow streets, hills, blind curves, that sort of thing. When an officer makes a traffic stop, it is about getting people to drive safer. So sometimes, yes, not using that signal can be a big issue. Think about the last time someone didn't signal and cut you off.
Why should I sign a ticket? I don't want to look like I agree with it.
Look at the ticket as a personal recognizance bond. You're signing it to say you will contact the court so you can be released to go on your way. If you don't sign the ticket, then you can be arrested and taken to see the magistrate at the jail.
Okay, so I signed the ticket. What happens next?
The law says you have to be given at least 10 days to contact the court to state what you plan on doing. At this point, you have options you can discuss with the court. You can ask to go to trial and have a judge decide your case. Some courts allow you to plead no contest and take defensive driving courses to then have the ticket dismissed. Or you can just pay the fine. If you don't have the money right away, almost every court will work with you to set up a payment plan. There are other options that you may have that vary court by court. The big thing is to ask and be sure to do it before the time set on your citation.
What if I think the officer acted inappropriately or was rude or didn't have a reason to stop me?
Hey, if you think the officer acted inappropriately, was rude, or didn't have a reason to stop you, remember, you can take it to court. A court will have the final say on whether or not you violated the law. If it's about the officer's behavior or treatment, please contact that officer's employing agency. They have investigators that will contact you, and they will thoroughly investigate the complaint. Don't forget that most officers in this state and even across the country now have either in-car cameras with audio or on body-worn cameras with audio, so that will be the beginning point of the investigation. After the department investigates your concern or complaint, they will contact you, let you know what the results were, what their findings were, and let you know what action, if any, was taken.
Do I have to let an officer search me or my car?
You have the right to deny a consent search of your car, and even if you say yes, you can change your mind at any time. A consent search means that the officer is asking you for permission to search your car. However, if the officer has probable cause to search, they not need consent. As far as a person, an officer can frisk a car. For example, if you are asked to get out, the officer can look inside before you get back in to see if there is a weapon within reach of the driver.
So now you have a better idea of how to handle the situation. Let's wrap things up and take another look at our traffic stop and how it could have turned out better.
We had pizza yesterday.
Right. No hamburgers, because I don't eat red meat.
That's right. Got a non-meat eater over here.
What about snappy salads?
Ooh, snappy salads.
Yeah,
talking my language now.
I haven't been there in a long time.
What you gonna get?
Salmon on it.
Yes, ma'am.
Make my own half snap.
Mm-hmm.
Salmon.
Mm-hmm. Hey, this man have brake lights on?
Doesn't look like it.
I didn't see brake lights on that one.
So, you're getting pulled over.
Don't panic. It happens.
Put on your signal and look for a safe place to pull off the road.
Bravo 742 traffic. It's going to be a Texas tag. George King 430 Lincoln. Occupied.
If you can get into a parking lot, great.
Put your car in park.
Roll down your windows.
Turn off your engine.
Keep your hands on the steering wheel and wait for the officer.
You will be asked to show your driver's license and insurance.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, officer.
Officer Opros, Dallas Police Department. You're being stopped today because your brake lights are out. Is there any reason your brake lights are out this evening?
No, sir. I didn't realize it was out.
May I see your driver's license and proof?
Do what the officer asks. If you have to reach into your console, let him know you're about to do it. They're in my console. Let me grab them.
Okay, go ahead.
Here you go, officer.
Thank you, sir. I'll be right back with you, okay, sir?
Yes, sir.
The officer may ask you to get out the car. Just follow the instructions.
Stand where you're asked. It will be the safest place.
Stay out of the car until you are told to get back in.
So where are you coming from tonight?
I'm coming from class. I had an exam today.
What kind of exam?
I had a history exam.
History exam.
Yes.
How did you do?
I think I did pretty well. We will not find out until tomorrow.
Oh, well, good luck.
Yeah, thank you. I
hope you
appreciate
did
it.
well also.
I hope I did too.
I wasn't very good in history.
No?
No.
What's your favorite subject?
Math.
Math? Not really that smart for math, but hopefully you get math a lot more than what I do. Wait for the officer to tell you it's okay to leave.
All right, sir. Here's your driver's license and insurance back.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, you're all set. Just a warning for the brake lights. You're free to go.
Thank you, sir.
Drive safe.
Thank you. You have a great night.
You too.
Have a good night.
You have a great night, ma'am.
Thank you. Look for a safe spot to leave. Usually the officer will wait for you to leave first.
On behalf of all the state and local partners that brought you this training video, thank you for watching. And safe travels across the great state of Texas.
We just want to keep everyone safe and get to our home at the end of the day.
So that kind of gives you an idea. I know in the video they talked a lot about the reason you have to do certain things is because of officer safety. There's also Supreme Court rulings that dictate all those things. So I'll talk about a little bit about what we commonly see. So usually it's they won't sign the ticket. So if you don't want to sign the ticket, our officer only has one option, and that is to take you to jail. Sign the ticket, get a court date, work it out in court. We're not going to, try the case on the side of the road. The other thing we commonly see is people not wanting to roll their windows down. You don't have a choice. You've got to roll the window down at least enough to where we can conduct the traffic stop and do so safely. The other big thing is officers asking people out of the vehicle. We have had people that flat out refuse to get out of the vehicle. And, you're only escalating that situation. Get out of the vehicle, stand at the back of the car off to the side where no one's in danger. I've seen too many times, on complaints and things like that, the officer did exactly what they were supposed to do, and it was the citizen that escalated the incident. And what would have resulted in a citation and sometimes even a warning resulted in a use of force usually and someone going to jail. And it doesn't have to be that way. So with that concludes everything that I've got. I appreciate the support from you all and the support that we see from the community here in Lewisville. It's greatly appreciated, and it's not something that all communities have, so we are very appreciative of that. So with that, we'll turn down these lights a little bit so I can see you all again, and I'll take any questions that you have. We've got officers around. If you feel more comfortable asking questions one-on-one with an officer, we'll be around for a little while longer to take your questions.
Chief, I just had wondering, proper procedure if you've got a weapon in your vehicle and you do get pulled over?
Yeah, it's always better to tell the officer that you've got it. If it's on your body, don't reach for it. As soon as the officer makes contact with you, tell them, hey, I've got a weapon, and tell them where it is. And, it's sometimes common to say it's over here in the glove compartment or the center console. Don't do that. Don't reach for it. Just make sure you verbally tell them where it's at, And then they'll probably, if it's inside the car, they'll probably ask you to step out of the car. But yeah, always better to inform the officers before they find it, if they eventually do.
I have a question. If you're on a secluded dark road and you get pulled over, if you're a male or a female, and especially as African Americans, if I decided to say, okay, I'm going to go up to where I see a lighted area.
Yeah, that's completely acceptable. We start having issues is when that turns into a greater distance down the road, because we don't know what that person's intentions are. Mm-hmm. We don't know if they're concealing a gun, something like that. So, in a city, it's a lot different. There's plenty of lighted areas in the city to pull over. If you're out on a county road somewhere, they're probably not going to let you drive 10 miles down the road without it turning into what they think is a pursuit. But what you could do if you're in that situation and you're just totally out in the middle of nowhere is call 911 and tell them that you're being pulled over. You don't know if it's a legitimate police officer or not, and you're going to go to the nearest service station or lighted area. But in the cities, in the DFW area, that's shouldn't be a problem, and I would urge you to pull over as quickly as possible. And it may not be the area that you want to pull over, but if it's a lighted area that would be safe, I would urge you to pull over at that immediate time. The other thing about calling 911 in a metro area like we have is you never know where that 911 call is going to go. Depending on where you're at in Lewisville, it may go to Flower Mound, it may go to Carrollton, it may go to Denton County, and by the time that call gets transferred back, you may be 5 minutes into that officer trying to stop you.
So is there training for officers to say, okay, I need to stop this person, but it is on a dark road, that they may have something that they could say to reassure me or my son? I mean, he's 50 years old, and I still tell him to be careful when he's traveling somewhere. And so, with oh, I'm sorry, he is. But, so that's a concern, that if that part of training would be, okay, I've got to pull this guy over. It is dark. What could the officer do to de-escalate a situation? Yeah, now I'll highlight just a couple of more things. So an officer should be in some sort of uniform. Every agency does things a little bit different. We do have people, our street crimes unit, they typically wear jeans, and they'll have a vest on that has a badge on it. So they should have a badge. If they don't have a badge, that's problematic. Do what now? Yeah, and all of our badges look the same. Some of them are a little bit different. They're not the metal badges, but they all have the same shape and design as our metal badge. That was something we changed a few years ago because we had generic sewn-on badges that really didn't look anything like our regular badge. But another thing you hear quite often that impersonating police officers and things like that. That is more common in extremely rural areas and places like that. It doesn't happen that often in metropolitan areas because they tend to do that sort of thing where they don't think another police officer is going to drive up on them. In the area like Lewisville and our surrounding communities, there's a real good chance someone's going to see the red and blue flashing lights, and if it's one of my guys, they're going to say, oh, well, the troopers have someone stop, let me go make sure they're all right. And that's not what a fake cop wants to see, is a real cop pulling up.
We love it when you go to a lighted place. We prefer that you do that because we don't want to be out on the dark, scary road either because we don't know who we're pulling over. At least you got an idea that it's probably a real police officer that's stopping you. I got no idea who's in the car that I'm pulling over or what their intention are. So I like it when they pull, I'll let them drive a long ways to get to a lighted place, pull into a gas station, so I'm not out on the road where I can get hit. I'm in a lighted place where I can see better into their car. So it works both ways.
Yeah, and what you can do too is if you're going to do that, roll down your window and kind of make a motion that, you know, you're going up the street, and by all means don't speed up or anything like that, because we're going to think you're trying to run from us.
Ma'am, just to, I was working at night a couple weeks ago and I had an incident where I was trying to stop somebody at night, kind of the same thing. And what this individual did is she turned on her hazard lights to tell me, to indicate to me, hey, I acknowledge I'm being pulled over. And she drove to the nearest gas station, which was about maybe 50 to 175 yards in front of us. There was a residential street she could have turned into, but in my mind, I was like, okay, well, this person has acknowledged that they're trying to pull over. And so it gave me the heads up, okay, we're on the same page, you know what's going on. She pulled over and stopped, and that was her thing. She was like, I'm sorry, this is a better lit area for you, and you don't have to worry about cars passing you at, you know, higher rates of speed because it's a residential street, which I appreciated, but I also told her, hey, I appreciate you turning on your hazard lights so that it kind of reciprocated the idea or the notion that, okay, hey, I understand I'm being pulled over. So in certain situations or circumstances, if, let's say you are in the city of Lewisville and you are maybe in a spot where a couple of street lights are out and you see like, hey, these street lights are lit, you know, a couple streets down or whatever, nothing too far. If you want to turn on your hazard lights, just to kind of indicate, hey, I understand what you're trying to do. And like Chief Deaver said, you don't drive anything excessively far, or you don't accelerate at a sudden, you know, high rate of speed to try to act like you're getting away. Fortunately, we get a lot of exposure here, so we can see context clues like that, right? Hazard lights are turned on, your speed doesn't increase, you're slowing down. We can kind of see those gestures and understand what you're doing.
All right, any other questions?
Just one other comment, and I was just going to say on the flashing lights video, some feedback that I think you and I talked with, but I think it's a collaboration with TEA, right, with it and everything. So, but it would help if, just like we were sharing, if the officers would be in, and I think you talked on because it's required curriculum in the, I think it's 9th through 12th now, I believe it is, or 10th through 12th, anyway. But while they're showing the video, you know, that real-time action, you know, so that the kids can ask, you know, these questions and this and that. I think that would go a long way, and that was some of the feedback that I'd shared with them as well, you know,
Yeah,
and I think they put in their guidelines.
Totally agree with that. You know, we don't have any say in how they implement it. I mean, it may be an online thing that they sign off that they watch the video.
Yeah.
I hope it's not, but that may be what it turns out to be.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to be around for a little bit. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them one-on-one. And as you can see, I've got plenty of experts that have been on the streets more recently than I have that can probably answer questions better than I can. Mike, thank you for being here. I don't know if you want to close anything out. And Pastor Will, thank you for allowing us to be here today. You were on the Listen, Learn, Lead, right? Were you on the Listen, Learn, Lead? Yeah. Appreciate you. You want to come up?
I just want to thank you for coming and spending your time here. And for those who are members and the people in our community come, I think it's really an important thing to work together for the good of the community. And I really believe that the more we work together, the better our community will be, and we will be also. And I spent lots of hours working as a chaplain in Flower Mound and working with the chief of police, and I just think it's wonderful. And being on the council with the mayor, it was really good to have a discussion. So I think we're moving in the right direction. If we keep moving like this, it's going to be better for all that come after us. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for sharing. God bless you.
I don't know, Mike, do you want to close this out? And I will say we have been recording this, so this will go on our transparency page as the first town hall, so it'll be available for viewing later.
Super. Great job, Chief. And once again, thank you all for coming. We just want to, like as Chief said, the officers will be out if you want to continue in conversation, but we'll just close out this session with a short word of prayer. If everyone could stand. Dear God, we just want to come and thank you for this time. Lord, we believe it is time well spent, dear Lord, as we build bridges, oh Lord, into the community and vice versa, dear Lord, and learn more about each other, dear Lord. And we just thank you, dear God, that you made this transparent. And Lord, that how we can just feel a little bit better and understand, Lord, what is going on and how we can help better in preparation and just serving. We just thank you for our officers. We continue to pray your hand of protection over them as they serve and protect us, and we just bless your name and thank you for this time. And again, we do pray, Lord, that we can use this as a building block, a stepping stone, oh God, into the coming years, and Lord, and make this a periodic build on, oh Lord, into reaching out into the community and sharing and then getting to know one another better, Lord, because just as the movement was started, the better you know your community, the better you can serve. And so we thank you once again in Jesus' name. Amen.